wasn't just the ghetto UFC mess that was at the White House this weekend. There was also a plaintive call for justice. Take a look.
Things that authoritarians want you to do is shut up. They want the lies to have the last word, but say not on our watch. They want meanness to have the last word, say not on our watch. They want you to be scared to be in the street, but say not on our watch. No, we have to speak, for the Bible declares the power of life and death is in the tongue. The greatest nonviolent thing you can do first in a season of lies is to tell the truth. That's why Moral Monday is every Monday. Hold your signs high so folk around the world and then they can see all of you can come. And somebody take pictures and begin to just send them out, send them out, send them out. Everybody is welcome. Everybody is welcome.
We are here today because people are hurting. SNAP benefits have been cut for 3.5 million poor people. Health care has been stripped from millions of Americans. Our immigrant neighbors are being kidnapped from their homes and jobs. They're being kidnapped from their jobs to be put in concentration camps where they're forced to work. The cost of living has gone up for all of us because of an illegal and immoral war in Iran. And while the majority of Americans oppose what they see happening, this regime and its Supreme Court have conspired to dilute the power of our vote. We are here because the people who control our government have turned it against.
And joining us now is Assistant Director of the Center at Yale, and a lecturer in public theology, spiritual writer, preacher, and community cultivator, chair of the board for Repairs of the Breach, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, as well as minister and activist, founding director of the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy, and a professor of practice in public theology at Yale Divinity School, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign and president of Repairs of the Breach, a moral movement building organization. On this Moral Monday, our Moral Monday pastor, Bishop Barber. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk about you all doing your own version of a White House event that was not involving a cage match, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove. Your thoughts on all the spectacle this weekend, and why were you all there?
Well, you know, the so-called ultimate fight was a sort of distraction and a sort of performance of a view of power that we think is fundamentally flawed, because the true fight, the real fight, is the nonviolent fight for the tools of our government. And that's what has been stolen from the people. And so the pulpit in front of the White House is about raising a moral cry against the violence that's being done by our government against people, and casting a vision for how we can reclaim the government and reconstruct this democracy.
Bishop Barber, you know, I know that you were listening to Doug Jones, who has his own moral fight that he's been fighting really his whole adult life in Alabama. And it feels like that fight is so prescient now. It's like we're back to the 1960s, 50s. And the fact that you all had to preach in front of the White House, it says something about where we are.
It does. And I was there when Doug won for the Senate. In fact, we went down and mobilized Black and white people around economic issues and race issues. And it was a key factor in him winning in the Senate. You know, Joe, we go to church on Sundays and synagogue on Saturdays and temple and mosque on Fridays every week. The Bible tells us we should have a pulpit in the street in front of the halls of power every week. That was never meant to be quarantined. The truth of the gospel, the truth of the prophets was never meant to be quarantined, right? It should be in the street. It should be laying out both a critique of policy. I think we're rooting in Jeremiah 22, it says, go down to the palace and tell the king these 7 things. Stop killing people. Stop mistreating the immigrants. Stop hurting children. I mean, it's just clear. And then it says, because this is the only way to prove you love God. If you're not doing these things, all of the other stuff is just choreographed holiness. But it has nothing to do with true, authentic, moral authority. So we're doing that, and it's in 16 states. We're going to build out. July 6th is going to be a big day, big day. But we're having tens and tens of thousands of people. We're now getting major groups that are live streaming, and people are coming out. We have the Episcopal deacon, the bishop of the Lutheran Church, a major Baptist minister came all the way up from Charlotte. Last week we had a lady who's over the convocation of the Christian Church. I mean, people are starting to understand. And we turn one of the speakers to the White House, Joy, every Monday. And the witness, the song says, God needs a witness. We have to keep the witness going consistently. And this is what I want to say about Alabama. As you were talking to Judge, somebody has to tell folks, listen, Trump won Alabama by 670,000 votes. But did you know that 12% of black folk voted for Trump in Alabama? Did you know that 46% of poor folk voted for Trump in Alabama? But that means 55% didn't. Did you know that in Alabama there are 1.2 plus million poor and low income people? Uh, Over 600,000 of them didn't even vote at all. And if there was someone running in Alabama for governor, for whatever, that knows these numbers and mobilize these people who are getting hurt, as Jonathan said, and the government has been turned against them, that's actually where you have the power to shift even a deep southern state. And not so much by coming to the South to rescue the South, but by people who are already in the South being empowered to strengthen and deepen the work that they're already doing, and no longer saying that these areas are off limit. Somebody has to stand up and say, no, I'm going to be a witness to another reality.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, I was, it sort of occurred to me as I was having the conversation with Doug Jones, and I had wanted to talk to him about this for a long time, that there's a desire among the present leaders of the Deep South for their state to be invisible to the nation. They allow some visibility to Fox, and they stay on Fox just themselves, and they talk about narrow issues like that random trans kid maybe playing theoretically sports
That's right.
somewhere that no one's ever seen, and that, one instance of some immigrant doing a crime. They try to just keep you focused on that. What they want is for us to look at the UFC fight in DC and not look at Alabama. Because if you
That's
really looked at Alabama and saw Alabama and looked into it, you'd see that they were being abused by data centers, that they were being abused by forced poverty. I mean, you keep a third of your state poor on purpose based on racism, you have a poor state. They don't want anyone to see it. So how can we raise the visibility of states like Alabama so that even the Democrats are forced to see them?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we're having these Moral Mondays. I just came from the one in Raleigh, North Carolina, and one of the facts we were paying attention to is that 218,000 people in North Carolina have already lost access to health care since the big ugly bill passed last year. Now, when we were there, people from North Carolina came up to Moral Mondays last year to tell members of Congress what was going to happen. We even had a Republican senator from North Carolina, Tom Tillis, oppose the bill because he acknowledged that some 600,000 people would eventually lose their health care because of the cuts. But the Congress went ahead and pushed it through anyway, and Trump signed it. So the people in these places know what's happening to them. They see what's happening, and they see that at the same time that the results of this policy violence is beginning to hit the community. Folks are losing SNAP benefits. Folks are losing their health care. That's when the attack on voting rights is happening. We've seen the states gerrymandering. We're looking right here in North Carolina at a bill that's being proposed this week in the legislature to basically rearrange the state election board so that the Republicans who are in charge of it right now can manipulate it to do whatever they want.
That's right.
So these are people who understand that there are folks in their states that do not like what they're doing, and they are taking active measures to suppress the power of those people's vote.
And Bishop,
Joy,
how then do you get people to force their way back into power? Because you're seeing what you just described as resignation. If 670,000 people just say, I'm just not, there's no point. How do you get them to change their mind?
Well, two ways. One is, as a preacher, even on Sundays, that's the point of the pulpit, to keep people focused, right, on what we're supposed to be. When you go into church on Sunday, it is to remind you of your moral vision, of your calling, what you're supposed to be about. Well, just like you need that in the private sector, you need it in the public. People have to be reminded. People have to be inspired. People have to be revived. And also, you have to make sure, though, that it's not just critique. I'm a little concerned about even some people that are running for office, and they'll spend their whole 30 minutes before a crowd just on critique of Trump. Now, you should critique it, but people, if you go to the end of some of the Montgomery March, and Dr. King did his sermon over 45 minutes in Montgomery, the last part of it, he says, "Give us the ballot," and then he lays out a vision of what the vote is for, not just what we're against, but what it's for. And that has to be consistent, just like synagogue every Saturday, just like it has to be over and over again. That's what we're doing. Secondly, you've got to have politicians who will stop ignoring people, who will offer folk a vision when they can hear it most. And you know when you can hear it most, you know when you'll take your medicine the most? When you're sick,
Yeah.
when you're hurting. See, the enemies of justice always make one critical mistake. They make too many people hurt. It's a great scripture in the Bible, and it puzzled me for years when God tells Ezekiel to go to the valley of dry bones. And I'm thinking, and I said, here are people who were so dismissed that they didn't even get a proper burial. These were the people that policy leaders just like the Bible says, that was an epidemic of justice. And God sends Ezekiel, he says, your hope is in the valley of dry bones. Now go down there and preach. And I'm saying, wait a minute, they are half buried, so forth. But the teaching, the deep wisdom of that text is pain opens people's ears at a deep level. Hurt will open people's heart at a deeper level. And that's what drew black and white people together after the Civil War. They saw that they had all been bamboozled, right, in the first Reconstruction. And it opened them up to hear one another. White folk, former slave, former freeman, and you know what they did in the first Reconstruction. And so I believe if the politicians and small leaders will have the courage in this moment to recognize history is not finished, it is unfolding. And the question is, what will be our message and our mission and our witness in the unfolding? Where will we plant ourselves, in this moment?
And I mean, Jonathan, I think that is brilliant to get people to see that. I think the problem is that the people that are harming these people don't fear them. You know what I mean? They have so suppressed their hope that they're not worried about the poor people in their state, even the poor white people. They're not worried those poor white people are going to vote against them. They just dangle, silly distractions in front of them. They think that's enough. But for most of those people, they don't even vote on that. They don't vote at all. I always tell people try to blame poor white people for voting for Trump and voting for Republicans. They don't vote. They don't
Right.
vote.
Which is opportunity.
Which is where the
always,
potential.
They may actually, but there are moments, Joy, in history where people do start fearing what people are doing to them. There are some hurting folk now, and Jonathan and I always look at the numbers. Yes, poor folk may vote for somebody like Trump, but look at the other side. Last year, what was it, Jonathan? Last time was the first time that poor and low-wage people, $50,000 family, voted over 50% for a Republican. That had not been happening. So it's two sides of the coin. Yes, there are people that don't vote, but there's also a group of folk who have consistently voted progressive, not enough. And part of the reason is that they're not being, Joy, what do we do when we go to church and the preacher? We say one of three things. We say it, Reverend, or we say, help him, Lord. and in some ways, we need to be saying, help him, Lord. You got all these folk out here that are not participating, and you're not going to go after them. You're not going to give them a vision for a better future. You're going to allow them to continue to be hurting and not believe that there's the possibility that in this moment, enough of them, because you don't need all of them. You
Right.
don't need all of them. You just need a
more
strong
of them.
river. More
You
of
just
them.
need, last word to you, Jonathan Winslow Hartgrove. How do we get more of them?
Well, one thing is to help people understand the potential of their power. So all of that policy violence we were talking about that came through this Congress is the result of a majority in that Congress that is really just based on 7,000 votes
Yep.
in a national election where some 90 million people didn't vote. So people who are feeling the pain of that policy literally have the power to show up. And in some of these places in the South where they've gerrymandered, they've gambled that they don't need as much margin as they had last time. So if people show up who haven't voted because they know that they have the power to change who's in power, who's representing them in the Congress, then we could have different representation in the midterm elections. I think that's the essential thing, to tell people that you have power, and if we use it together, we have an opportunity to have a very different vision for what the government can do.
Amen. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and Bishop William J. Barber II. Thank you all. Thank you all, and happy Moral Monday. And thank you for always speaking truth to power.
And you know we're headed to Germany. We'll talk to you when we get back.
No, what? No way. Where are you in Germany? What y'all going to do in Germany?
Well, we're actually headed. Jonathan is, and I am, and I'll be lecturing and preaching in Germany, in Berlin. Jonathan can say where he'll be. But interestingly enough, the German people and the church is really wrestling with what must be its position now in this alternative for Germany that's rising up, and this extreme right. So, but it's interesting that in this moment, the bishop and the president of the World Council says, "Come over here, and let's begin to have a international geopolitical moral conversation about what's really going on." Jonathan, you tell where you'll be.
I can't be envious with pastors on with me, so I won't say that I'm envious if y'all going to Germany without me, but I'm just going to think it in my mind and not say it out loud. Bishop Barber, call me on WhatsApp while you're over there. Bishop William Barber, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, two of our favorites. Happy Moral Monday. Thank y'all both very much. Safe travels.
Be with you, Joy.